Turn the bass up.
I got the profit up. I always double up. It ain't nothing, bruh. It ain't nothing, bruh.
Hey, true believers. Chris Mack coming at you today with a movie that is both freaking terrifying if you're a horror film fan, but it's also going to make your ass laugh. But what's important is today I got my buddy with me. This is the man, the myth, the legend, the Candyman. I am the Shadow. Feel free to introduce yourself there, brother.
Hey guys, what's up?
That's it. We just get a hey man, what's up? Today we are going over Tucker and Dale versus Evil. This is definitely one of my underrated favorite films, and this is the one that Shadow has definitely been poking at me to do, and I'm sure you guys have heard through my reviews that life has been a nightmare, but we're finally able to be the dynamic duo and get this sucker reviewed. So if you'd please, my brother, get us started.
All right, so Tucker and Dale, it was a $5 million production. It was highly acclaimed by Roger Ebert, who is an American film critic, but it still did not get the numbers for the box office to pay its tab on the price of admission, which kind of sucks because it was such a great movie. I am not a fan of super gory movies and super like horror theme stuff that's more on the lines of kind of like crazy, like where it doesn't really make sense. Like I like to have some logic behind horror movies. Kind of like how Split was, where the guy had multiple personalities. Sorry, spoiler. But a lot of the movies that came around that time was The Ward, which was $10 million. It started with $10 million. Insidious, which was a $1.5 million start, and Inception, which was a $160 million start. We have Dale as Tyler Labine, and then Tucker as Alan, I'm going to probably butcher this, Tudyk. And then Eli Craig, who directed it, who also directed Little Evil, Zombieland TV show. It's a movie that really had an impact on me because what it does is it takes the camera angle and it changes it for the viewer to explain that, you know, Tucker and Dale are really just trying to save these teenagers because, like, in the beginning of the movie, there is a girl, and I can't quite remember her name, but she falls into the water, and so they go onto a boat, and they try to save her because she's drowning. And so the other teenagers and college students are looking at them, and it looks like Tucker and Dale are, like, dragging her into, you know, the boat, you know, ready to murder her, but really they're just trying to help her. And
well, what didn't help matters in that part of the movie is before she would drown, the kids go up there for like a Memorial Day weekend or something like that, and the Chad, as we shall call him, I think that was his name, even, you know, a little too on the nose. But they were talking about the Memorial Day massacre, everything that happened up there, so they were already on edge. And as Shadow here was pointing out, the back and forth point of view just makes this, you know, changes your perception. Because when you see the kids, you're like, oh, holy shit! But then when it switches back to the rednecks, you're just like, leave them alone. They're trying to help the girl.
Yeah, and it's crazy because there's parts of the movie where you're like, ah, man, like that would really happen if you know someone be stupid enough to like there's just so many tropes in this that from like other horror movies, like running away and then it not working. There's one part where the guy doesn't really know how to shoot the gun, and it's towards the end, and I think either Tucker or Dale says, you know, you gotta turn the safety off, and then he turns the safety off by looking at the barrel. You know, the barrel's faced right. The barrel is in his face, and he shoots himself. And I'm like, that would really happen. And so it's a movie that, it takes the tropes of camera angles that, we know from like horror movies, to be like an essential part of a scary experience, because really the camera angle shows the point of view of what the viewer's actually seeing. So what it does is it reverses it and says, well, maybe, let's look at it at a different angle, and you can see that the teenagers are clearly idiots, and it's actually they're and Tucker and Dale are really trying to help people. But if you ever like get the movie like on DVD, they actually did a second part, and I was just looking this up. The Tucker and Dale DVD has a where they switch the camera angle again, and now when you have the view as like you're the college student, or like being a part of that group, it looks like an actual horror movie. So
And what
it's
makes
all
it
in the
better
camera.
is the fact that whenever
Yeah.
you're with the college kids and the death scenes, they always make sure that the death scenes are ramped up, and you as the viewer going, "Oh God, that's a little uncomfortable. That's intense." But then what helps, and this is what I was talking about, horror comedy, is you get those intense, gory scenes, and then you jump back to Tucker and Dell, and they're not exactly unfazed, but they're just kind of like, "Oh gosh," like it's just very deadpan comedy, and that's what makes it the best. Is you don't see them freak out. They try to kind of explain it, sort of like Shaun of the Dead when with the zombies
Yes,
with the
which is
Simon
another
Pegg and
favorite of mine.
Jack, whatever his last name is, but they're not like super terrified, but that deadpan comedy just really helps in those intense situations.
Oh yeah, especially the wood chipper. Oh my goodness, I almost threw up. That one was, and you can see that in just the trailer. Because I'm trying not to spoil this if anybody hasn't seen it. There's a bunch of things in the movie. There's the tropes of like, Friday the 13th, where there's, a chains or not Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th in a way where they're at a cabin. And then there's like, you have Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and there's elements in there, and it's a movie that, it really makes you think, and I just like those types. You really wouldn't think, a comedy movie would do that, but then you're like, but then you look it into the point of view and the camera angle, and it makes you, like, oh, I wonder what I would do in that situation.
And I do think that a lot of horror films nowadays, I think, are kind of starting to really need to poke fun of themselves, because back in the day, let's go all the way back to I think the movie was called Peeping Tom, that did the first point of view murders, and people found that uncomfortable because back in the 70s and whatnot, that was not talked about. And then of course we come 70s, 80s with the ultra violence that everyone loves. Jason Voorhees slamming a person in a sleeping bag against a tree. And even now, let's go to Terrorizer 2. Just to kind of, there's even elements of comedy in that. They can't take themselves too serious anymore. I mean, I think that's why Scream, for example, works so well, because Wes Craven at that point was just making fun of himself, and I think that's why even Freddy got so funny over the years.
Yeah, I haven't seen Scream. That's something that's on my bucket list. Because I've heard it's not much of a horror, but more thriller, and I'm more into thriller and more into
You
just
do know this
just
movie came
horror.
out in 1996, right, brother?
Yes, and the reason why it's something that I want to see is because it doesn't work today, because people didn't have cell phones. Like cell phones are the main
Oh, I know
reason
the
why
way
that
they try
movie
to explain away cell phones now has just gotten so ridiculous.
that movie doesn't work with the technology we have now.
Well, that's
So
what I
that's why
liked
I've
about
always
Tucker and Daryl is a lot of the times you go camping, you ain't gonna have reception, so you don't have to
no.
worry about that little detail. Yeah, that thing, the thing that does things on the thing with the thing.
Yeah. There's the, the cop trope. Like the teenagers are trying to kill Tucker and Dale. So that is something that you are it's a reversed role now. it's now the teenagers that look like they are evil and trying to kill Tucker and Dale when they're not doing anything at all. Because again, this is a version of turning the camera a different way. It's showing a different point of view. So you really are cheering for Tucker and Dale to get out of here, and like if you think about it in like a video game aspect, to win the game. And so I just think that it's a movie that like completely changes. Like if they were to make another movie like this, I would be in the theater for the as soon as possible, as soon as it came out, because it's such a different movie. Like how you were mentioning Shaun of the Dead, which is also a really like it's another favorite of mine. What did you like about that movie that stood out to you on that one?
Oh, again with Shaun of the Dead, there's so much the social commentary. I mean, if you look at the beginning of the film when they're kind of doing that little jingle, that dun 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 dun, and it shows like the zombies bopping to the beat, and it shows other people on their cell phone. I mean, it feels a little on the nose when you really get down and look at it. But again, how far are off are we? I mean, who's on their cell phone and has bath salts and they're just waiting to bop their head that way, or again, just the different perspectives where
Hmm.
like well, not Edgar Winter, that's the director. Simon Pegg comes home and he's like, "What are you doing?" There's a lady in the garden, and even after they like when they go outside and they're like, "Listen, Mary," and they think she's coming on to him, even though she's got that look on her face, and they shove her, and then the pipe goes through her guts, and again, they don't like scream and flee. It's more just kind of that deadpan comedy, and they're just like, "Whoo!" Stuff like that, because again, they're not taking themselves too serious, but there's stakes and there's moments of horror, but just that little bit for you to have that morbid just really helps.
Yeah. It's like that Mr. Bean aspect where he doesn't have to talk, but you have a whole bunch of things that are happening, and he's just acting them out, and it just the way that it's very funny how he does things, and that's why he's the GOAT. But yeah, and that's the reason why I think like these comedies that we've had in around the 2010. When was Shaun of the Dead made? It was like 2013, 2014, something like that. It's still
2010 is when this movie
decent.
came out in January.
No, I was talking about Shaun of the Dead.
Oh, I don't know. It just came
Uh,
out and it exists.
but yeah, Shaun of the Dead and this movie and there was another movie that the Shaun of the Dead guys did, and
Oh, they,
it's
they
this is
did
a
the Cornetto trilogy, man. They did Shaun of the Dead, which was red ice cream. They did Hot Fuzz, which was blue ice cream because of cops, red for blood. And then, what was it called? The End of the World, or the Bar at the End of the World, or whatever. And it was green because green ice cream for aliens.
oh, okay. Shaun of the Dead came out in 2004. Um,
Okay.
so it's actually older than Tucker and Dale, which I thought
Yes.
they were about the same. Um,
Well, comedy
so yeah,
horror is not a new trend. It's always been around, but I think it's just people are realizing that you can't really get away with it. I mean, unless you're going to do something that's just straight up uncomfortable, like I said, Terrorizer 2 or Hostel, like going the Eli Roth route, for example.
and then I did a complete turn and I watched The Quiet Place. Like that is my first introduction into like legit like it's more like Alien where it's more like a thriller, but there is some horror aspects in the Quiet Place. I went from Tucker and Dale versus Evil to The Quiet Place, which is a very serious. So,
That's okay. Don't get me
um
started on The Shining. I'll keep everybody here for a good 6-7 hours. Yeah,
I
Stanley Kubrick is my jam, man. And I just got done watching Doctor Sleep, and yeah, we're not going to go down that route. We'll have to wait to save that for another video.
okay. Well, is that who so why'd you bring The Shining up? Because maybe I just missed something.
Well, because Stanley Kubrick, when he did The Shining, when I'm thinking like The Quiet Place or Insidious, that
Yeah.
This is gonna sound bad. Feel free to make me fun of me down in the comments, but they have like what's called highbrow horror, where there's people like me that just loves to dive into the muck and they're like, "You got your leg sliced off." You can't take me to a horror film because I laugh. But then we have those that have the thought that horror films have to be thoughtful and engaging, and so you got shit like what was that movie called, The Babadook, and Insidious, stuff like
Hmm.
that. And I'm just like, hell, just give me Hobo with a shotgun and I'm happy. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the highbrow horror too, but there's times where I just want to turn my brain off, like with Tucker and Dell, and I just want to watch shit get slaughtered. I want to see blood fly in a fun way, because there's when you get to the slaughterhouse stuff, that's a little, you know, we could talk about slaughterhouse films later. But anyway, going back to The Shining, Stanley Kubrick, yeah, that man was a prodigy and a
Hmm.
savant, and taking Stephen King's, which when you read the book's good, the book's horrifying, but Stephen King dropped the ball doing that TV adaptation of The Shining, and Kubrick just was able to make it smart enough in terms of watching the geography of the house, where Danny's going through the house, like the top layer with his three wheeler or whatever, and the bottom layer, when you actually, and this is actually part of a documentary, that was the room number, which was what, room 247 or something like that. Anyway, the architecture does not make sense. Like when you look at the floor plans, the house
Hmm.
does not match up, and it's little nods like that that make the movie deeper and engaging. And again, going back to Tucker and Dell, yeah, it's a type of slaughter film that you can kind of turn your brain off to. But if you're not paying attention to the point of views and perspectives that they're trying to do, because that's exactly what film started as. And I mean, you go all the way back to the 20s. I can't remember the name of the film, but there's a guy who's taking the camera all over the place, and you kind of see an eyeball superimposed in the background, and it's showing that I'm the director. You are going to watch what I want you to see, and that is what movies are. It's a visual medium, just like music. And this, when you drop your sick beats. Speaking of which, I forgot to mention this, but that sick beat that you hear at the intros of our After Dark videos, this is the man that mixed it for us. So, going on a little different anecdote, thank you very much, Honey Bunny. It is very much appreciated, and I love to beat to it. Wait, that came out wrong. I love to bop my head to it.
It's no problem, man. I love making music. So, yeah, and since we're getting back to me, I am not a big fan of movies in general. Just because I'd rather be a part of the movie. Like if I was like, the actor, or I like to be parts of the project. And so what I've started getting into is horror video games. So like there's a big story driven, when you were talking about the house, it reminded me of this. Um there's a company called the Dark Pictures Anthology. And they have a game that this is their ooh, it's it's a I can't remember how many games they have, but Dark Pictures Anthology has a whole line of video games. But what they are is they're a story driven video game. So it's like you're walking through a horror movie. And you make choices and you try to have your characters survive through the whole game. And when you were mentioning the house, there is the last game that they have is about Jack the Ripper. This is after Jack the Ripper has died and everything, and this is in present time. And so there's a collector who collects all the Jack the Ripper stuff, and kind of builds the house that Jack the Ripper had during the early 1900s. And it's it's very like brought to like now, like where there's trap doors and everything, but very like how you were saying with The Shining, the map of the house does not match if you were ever to look into a blueprint of the house, like very similar to that. And so I just thought to mention that because that was something that when when you were talking about The Shining, that's something that reminded me of the video game, and so that's something that I really like
Oh hell yeah!
game.
I grew
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
My when PlayStation came out, Resident Evil 2, those were mine. Dead Space. I mean,
Hmm.
horror survival games are the bee's knees. Those there always will be. I mean, the jump scares do get a bit monotonous. I haven't played the latest Resident Evil film. That thing that we're just talking about, games. but
Res-
was it
yeah,
7, 10, 9 now?
it's actually for the remake. They just did it,
No, 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 no,
and
no, no,
I
no.
highly
The one with the Victorian chick.
Oh, that's Resident Evil Village. And then they just remade Resident Evil 4 remake, which is amazing, by the way. Um, but we don't have time to talk about all the video games in the world that I love.
Yeah.
So,
So I think that's a perfect way to end this review, ladies and gentlemen, is Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Great type of film if you love, again, slasher films that are slapstick like Ash versus Evil Dead. It's definitely going to be up your route. And it has just the right amount of slasher, comedy, and, as M. Night Shyamalan would say at the end of the movie, there's a twist. So with that said, I first and foremost want to thank The Shadow for coming out, brother. I always appreciate you, man.
I appreciate being here.
And with that said, if you've enjoyed this review, we really would appreciate if you take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Helps the After Dark channel more than you can possibly know. Speaking of which, thank you for giving us 300 subscribers. Every time you guys talk with us down in the comments, it just makes me happy to know that we are building a community. So if you have enjoyed it, please hit the subscribe button and also hit that Tucker bell next to subscribe. That way we continue to upload content. You guys get notified. Come to the channel, and we love hearing your thoughts and feedback down in the comments below or our social media pages, which I will make sure to leave the links down in the deception. I'm going to leave it with that. So with that said, I hope y'all continue to have an absolutely amazing day reading and watching horror films, and happy hunting and viewing, true believers.